start.
In its current state, we think the point of education is to expand and diversify your thoughts as much as possible. Insofar as school is a huge factor in shaping you as an individual, shaping you to who you are likely to be in the future, that is why we should prioritize education and diversification of ideas. Insofar as having AI written tools limits this in the sense that I'm going to prove to you later, that's why we should ban it and that's why we should not have it currently in the status quo. I'm going to do 3 things here in my speech. Firstly, on setup. Secondly, on why the principle of learning gets much worse when you use AI. And thirdly, then why this leads to massive practical harm to society. Firstly, let's just do some setup, right? Because what are these AI writing tools, for example, ChatGPT, primarily used for? 3 things. Firstly, they're likely to be used in written subjects, for example, in English and social science classes. Not only does this look like having analysis done for you for ChatGPT, but it also just looks like having historical sources being done, but probably made up because it's ChatGPT, on like these sources, on these websites. But no, secondly, that is likely to be used in not only marked assessments, for example, NC internals, but the homeworks that you actively engage with, right? For example, if you could get an analysis to some English text, then you're likely to have questions and ChatGPT because that's the easiest way for you to do it. But secondly, know that it's probably to some degree used as a sense of inspiration, but know that it's oftentimes very prone to errors and incorrect analysis. Now, at the end of this point, then, what you should believe is that this AI technology is most likely to be used in assessments and homework for all these different written subjects. What is our model then? We're going to firstly ban it from secondary and tertiary schools, but over here, secondly, that we're going to have technology and software to detect it, right? For example, this looks like having turned it in for IB that can detect AI writing, and we think that even if there isn't an existing market or there's a limited market, there's reasons to develop for 2 reasons. Firstly, because we think as AI naturally develops, because people see it as like the future, you're probably going to need new anti-AI like counter acts, but also secondly, not that it's just a market to tap into, right? If people are so worried about it, there's probably just going to be likely better and better AI detecting software, and eventually reaching an adequate level to be able to detect it to a relatively good scale. Firstly, before I begin my points, let's just frame out why students are likely to easily use AI instead of doing actual work, right? 2 reasons for this. Firstly, it's likely to be extremely easy. What you can do is just copy and paste your homework questions to be able to enter it into your ChatGPT and be able to get a relatively like good sounding answer. But then secondly, it's just a trend, right? When you see the peers around you use it and you see them having successes, you yourself are likely to tap into it, even if you feel like you are academically good. But no, thirdly, it's just like relatively good, right? Because the point of ChatGPT and other AI softwares isn't to provide a good answer, but to provide an answer that sounds relatively like a human. Then they're able to trick you into thinking that it's relatively good, even without the actual analysis being right. Argument 1 then, why does the principle of learning get much worse when you actually use AI? 3 things on this. Firstly, let's just frame to you what we're here to support and what learning is actually about. Because note here, under the status quo, schools largely operate to shape you as a person. 3 things on this. Firstly, note that examples of this is that there's oftentimes a core curriculum of what you want to learn to diversify and find your interests, right? For example, the schools get you to learn both math and English, not because they want you to have those skills, but because when you're able to grow up and choose, you now know and have different exposure to what you might want to like. But note here, secondly, know what these written internals actually look like, right? Because oftentimes they look like a research project or a written essay that encapsulates and thoughts and evaluation and the research that you get from out of it. Note here, thirdly, that also this looks like exposure to different ideas. The reason in history you study different topics is because they want you to be exposed to as many diverse and different ideas as possible in your education. Secondly then, let's just talk about then why does AI inherently ruin the principle of learning and what schools trying to promote with diversity. 4 things on this. Firstly, let's just know why how ChatGPT actually works, right? It gathers information from the internet and gives you a direct answer in the sense that you no longer need to engage with your own thoughts and viewpoints because you have a direct answer framed like roughly how you want it to right in front of you. But okay, secondly, that you just have less diverse exposure to diverse ideas. Not only does it manifest because it's just the one stop that you have in the sense that you never have to like go to anywhere else. But no, here where it actually gets its answer from is likely to be biased, right? If it gathers from a data bank, it's probably likely to be only specific amounts of source that you only get an answer that is likely to be biased from that point of view. But no, here thirdly, these assessments oftentimes are used for learning, right? When you learn a topic and then do an internal about it, it's some degree of being able to learning through repetition, right? You learn your skills through class and then learn about it and then apply it and then internal, right? At the point where you no longer have to do that process, the process of learning itself in class gets much, much worse. But also fourthly, note that the satisfaction of learning disappears, right? A big part of learning is personal triumph and personal skills developing. When you no longer have to spend hours on an internal and feeling proud of the work that you did, you are able to easily take the way out in terms of getting AI to write a relatively good enough answer for you. What is the last comparative then? Firstly, we think that what's likely to happen is that when you use Google, note that for difficult topics, you're likely to get clues but never the full answer. So at the very minimum, you're able to engage with more ideas. But then here, secondarily, that's just likely to be much more detailed in the sense that you're able to actually engage with specific views and experts when you're doing a school internal. Note here the impacts of this are twofold. Firstly, note that this is really independent of the outcome, right? Because this point is not contingent on the fact that these students get good or bad education outcomes, right? We think it doesn't matter what the end product is, in the sense that these individuals suffer the learning process itself, but also secondly, it's universal in the sense that no matter what happens, these principles we uphold will still stand. I'll take a point.
What other means of education are as equally accessible to poorer students over ChatGPT?
Wait, sorry, can you say again?
What other means of education are as equally accessible to poorer students over ChatGPT?
But the level of what you have for these poor students isn't exclusive to ChatGPT, right? But also, even if you frame it like that, you can still use it outside of school, right? So assuming you have the access to the internet to begin with, you're probably still likely to use it for miscellaneous things. But I've already told you the reasons for why Google is comparatively better. You're not shutting down just a main research method, right? Because what you instead have is Google, in which you're able to identify more sources, more different viewpoints, and we think that's a comparatively better solution for these poor individuals if they're even able to access the internet to begin with. Argument 2 down on why this leads to massive practical harms to society. 2 things on this. Firstly, let's just note why the students who oftentimes rely on AI are likely to succeed or fail in further life. 3 things on this. Firstly, they're likely to not inherently learn those essential skills necessary, for example, writing or researching, that I framed to you, right? When you no longer have the incentives to learn for it because you're able to just write an essay for it, that's a massive harm. But also, secondly, know that you're able to just fail later on when you actually need the skills but you don't have it. But also, thirdly, know that even if you do get the jobs that you want, for example, if you're able to write reports and become a doctor, that's bad for society because not only because even if you personally are a doctor, you're just a worse doctor because you never had to undergo the massive levels of education or research to become an actual qualified doctor. But also, secondly, note that it's just a massive harm of resources, right? Because firstly, 3 things on this. Firstly, you have to restructure the whole curriculum in the sense that it's a lot of curriculums, right? You probably realize that a lot of students will also be likely to use AI, so you have to restructure the internal in the sense that you probably have to change it to more niche topics or change it up so everyone isn't able to just chat GPT the most obvious cases. But also, secondly, note that it's just a lot of discourse and time taken, right? You have to talk with this in the educational ministry. You have to take on this for the teachers' time to talk about it, which all actively impedes on the time that the teachers can spend preparing resources, being able to teach students effectively. And there's a lot of mental burden when you feel like you as your teacher are trying your best to teach your students something, but note that you think they're just constantly cheating and not wanting to work on the assignments that you want to do. But also, thirdly, it just redirects attention from the actual issues, right? For example, this looks like minority representation in education, and this looks like schools wanting to abolish the NCA system and not making it better. What is the impacts on this then? So 2 things on this. Firstly, not only is it really, really bad for the average individual because you just have worse members of society who don't have the necessary skills to do this. So when they use ChatGPT all their life, not because they realize it's bad, but because they thought it was the best decision in life, it actively impedes on their opportunities to find a job and get better in life. But also, secondly, note that it's just much worse in terms of fixing the actual problems of education. Rather than focusing on how you get more minority representation, rather than focusing on how you're able to make the education system as best as possible, you're wasting resources, you're wasting time, and that's why we win. Thank you.
Thanks, speaker, for that speech, and welcome the first speaker for the opposition up to the floor.
AF characterises all students at tertiary and secondary education as the kind of students who will simply ask ChatGPT to write an essay for them, hand it in, and then expect the best grade that we can get. We agree with AF that ChatGPT does not have the same capabilities as a human, gets stuff wrong, and actually ultimately does not write an essay the same way that you can write one when you spend hours of hard work doing an internal. What we do think on side neg, though, is that AI and ChatGPT is a tool that we must use to its fullest in order to level the education playing field for students with learning disabilities, for students who are poor and don't have access to the same tutoring and resources that rich students have, and a tool that generally just has good educational outcomes because it provides students with a wide lens of viewpoints, unlike what I've tried to tell you. So first of all, I'll start with some rebuttal. Firstly, I've tried to tell you that that the primary reason for education is to sort of give someone a diversity of ideas, set them up for the future. We broadly agree with this. Well, they didn't explain to us why the presence of AI disengages a student from the diversity of ideas. They didn't explain to us how ChatGPT could make a student less interested in the content, and could make a student just disengage from the content at all. All they said was that a student would get ChatGPT to cheat for them, but then essentially what they said is that they would have tools in place to catch cheating and to catch plagiarism. And so what they said basically is that AI cannot be used for cheating because teachers have such good resources to catch it, and therefore their harms of AI being used to write essays go away. What we do think is that students who are prone to cheating and who have that incentive in mind are just going to go down the old school route of getting the kid who sits next to you in history class to write your essay for you on your laptop for $40, right? We don't think that with a system like AI that can easily backtrack on its own algorithm to figure out what's been written by AI, to figure out which students are cheating using ChatGPT, can have all of the harms that AFA's tried to present. They also admitted that ChatGPT could be used at home by most students. So that at the very end of their speech. And we see that actually many students only have computer access at schools. And so when you ban ChatGPT access from schools, you get the only students that have this amazing resource are the ones who have access to a computer at home, who have access to a phone at home, rather than the ones who have to do their work at school because there's a computer there. When you give this amazing tool to all students to use freely at school, it actually turns into an incredible tutoring program that can be available to all students and provides catered education. No, thank you. So, first point for you, ChatGPT is a tutor. How ChatGPT in a struggling education system is an effective personalized tutor, and it is absurd for us to accept on side negative that it is banned in the classroom. So, what do we see? We see a world where teachers teach a class of 30 students, professors do a tutorial of 25 and lecture 150. They are tired, they are overworked, they are underpaid. They are unable to handle the different learning needs of hundreds of students a week. Professors have no time to make resources for the hundreds of different learning needs that they need to cater to. We see a world where neurodivergent students and students with learning disabilities struggle in an environment that is not made for them and need more resources to help them along a journey of education that is just not designed for them. We think that ChatGPT is a great way to do this because ChatGPT has the capability to summarize long passages of text which are incredibly difficult to read for students with dyslexia or ADHD who can't focus for very long periods of time, right? ChatGPT has the ability to create resources for students like flashcards, like revision sheets. ChatGPT has the ability to explain, to simplify a topic that a student is really struggling with at school, but doesn't have access to a private tutor to explain it to them, so that we level out the playing field and they are now up to speed with the rest of their class. ChatGPT overall improves educational outcomes because it has these capabilities. What we think won't happen is ChatGPT bombarding the education system with a bunch of cookie cutter essays that students write, because we think that overall students do get satisfaction out of learning, and actually most students don't have the incentive to cheat, because we've seen pathways to cheat throughout history, because we know that some kids don't like to go to school and like to get the kid next to them to write their essays. We don't think that AI poses any difference to this, and in fact we think that it actually levels out the playing field, because now everyone has access to this software, instead of just the students who will find a way around it and do it at home and copy and paste onto a doc. We think that private tutoring is only available to rich students, very rich students, right? $50, $60 an hour right now, because there's such a demand for it, because teaching is getting less valuable because teachers are so overworked, and ChatGPT is uniquely a free, capable tutor who can cater learning to different students who all struggle with different parts of a topic, meaning they cannot get the education they need at school. A student who struggles with level 2 history might be completely different to like the student on the other side of the class who needs help from the same teacher for a completely different thing, and they can both go to ChatGPT and get a summary of the content to help them learn and help their education get better. Before I move on, I'll take a POI.
Even if you don't use ChatGPT for assessments, why won't students use it to do homework and limit their own creative thought?
We think that students using ChatGPT to like assist them with their homework is actually not that much of a harm. We think that a student ultimately who like wants good learning outcomes, the kinds of students that want to become doctors like you've characterized, are actually going to want to read through ChatGPT, also take in what their teacher has said, and just see it as a broader way to get their ideas in, right? We've heard from you guys that ChatGPT takes literally all of the internet and like feeds it into a paragraph that is easy to read and is accessible and is free to everyone. And we think that ultimately that actually just provides a broader education because you are able to like take more content in less time that can assist you with what you're learning in class. A lot of what Af has said is like around this idea that students will just like not be prepared for their futures, they won't know the stuff they need to know because they haven't engaged with it enough. But what we actually say is that we're not getting rid of school. We are not replacing school with ChatGPT courses, like so that students can just, you know, like go away and like go on the computers for an hour a day instead of coming to school. It's what we've characterized it as, and what we think it is a tool that students can use to assist them with their education that ultimately just creates better outcomes and levels the playing field. That is all it is. We do not think it is so deep that it will completely upheave the education of our entire country, of our entire world. We actually think that most students have an incentive to be good, well-rounded students if they want the outcomes for themselves that Af has said, like to become doctors, to do well at university, right? We think that actually the real reasons that we should keep ChatGPT around is because it looks like a student with ADHD who can't function in an overstimulating classroom finally having the chance to pass the class because they have a tutor at home on their desktop who can simplify the content for them or say it in fewer words in a less stimulating environment. It looks like a student who is really struggling to process level 2 social studies but who can't afford private tutoring being finally up to speed because at school they are given access to the resources that they need. We think that ChatGPT is like a unique and very capable resource that we should be using with caution, but still freely enough that it benefits those who need it the most. Thank you.
Now here, let's thank the speaker for that speech, and now we'll thank the second speaker for the proposition.
Three things I'm going to be talking about. Firstly, I'm going to be talking about why you make learning worse. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about the waste of resources, and even if they have like kind of decent educational results, it doesn't matter because of the huge opportunity costs they have. And thirdly, I'm going to be giving you a split on how this is perceived, on how like you perceive more people's qualifications as illegitimate and the harms that come about that, especially to minority groups. Firstly then, let's talk about learning. What we told you here is that you ruined learning. What are the reasons for this? We had 4 things here. Firstly, we told you that you don't take the time to read it and like go over and read through research. You don't take that time to actually evaluate what that Google article is saying because you just skip it. You just, as they say, get a summary of it. But secondly, is that students are lazy and they probably, but a lot of them like still kind of like want grades, and that's the incentive for them to go ahead and like do this work. And the reason why people just generally like won't do the work in their world is because it's hard. This work is hard. You do have to spend a lot of time on it, and they want the easy way out, and you provide them that easy way out. So that means that even if like so they rely on that AI to the last minute. So then they have to like cram before all the exams, and as a person who crams a lot, it sucks. It's not good for you. It's not good. You get worse results. So even the students that just still want to do well, the everyday student, as they characterize, is still going to do worse because they're going to rely on it. so they're going to rely on it too much. And they also, and thirdly, is you don't do that evaluation. You don't do that point where you like evaluate everything, where you look and you grab everything together. You make that true contrast where you say, what is like the bigger impact on like this biology thing, something like that. You don't do that final evaluation. You instead make ChatGPT do it, and so you don't do that crucial part of the evaluation where you actually put all your skills and learning together. But fourthly, is that you're forced to engage with with like the regular learning systems on our side. And when you do that, you get that satisfaction of doing that hard work. You get that satisfaction of finally completing that assignment and getting an E on it, and all of your hard work paying off. And then that creates a positive cycle where you want to do it again, and where it keeps on increasing the amount you want to learn and want to go on it. And the impacts of and on their side, they don't get that. You don't get that positive cycle. The impacts on the education result were twofold. Firstly, is that you're more likely to fail exams. You're more likely to fail that skills test section of the job interview. So you're less likely to get these people into those into jobs that's obviously harm in itself. But secondly, is that you get things like worse. Is that you just get like people who are in these industries, they're now worse. You have worse doctors. They develop medicine less, and they develop it slower because they aren't as smart, because they didn't go through that. They didn't go through that crucial step of education. They then did this whole big push on like poor people and disabled kids and how this is significantly more accessible to them. But we'll just say that like the explanations of why it is better than Google just aren't that good. 3 reasons for this. Firstly, is that because most people will probably just want to use it not to research and teach you, but instead like write your essay, write and do all the work for you. They try to say that like, the only evidence as to why people don't want to cheat is because alternatives exist and they don't use those. But those alternatives aren't nearly as accessible as ChatGPT. Your friends don't always want to write your history essay. You can't always just like copy them, or else you get in trouble with the teacher. So what that means then is that there are people who want to do this because of all the incentives I gave you on how it's hard, but they don't do it because there aren't any viable alternatives. But you give them that huge alternative. You give them the capacity to act out on their bad incentives. But second, so you get all of those harms I brought you before on how it just gives you worse learning. But secondly, is that it's not designed. Secondly, I just say that ChatGPT isn't designed to teach you. ChatGPT isn't the tutoring bot. It's an AI. It's not designed. It doesn't have like this complex system. It doesn't understand like the full process of tutoring. So I don't think it's that good of a tutor. It's that good of a tutor, anyways. But Freddie, is that alternatives exist? If you have dyslexia, you can like capitalize the letters. If you can research, you can do things like capitalize the letters. You can just like use Google. Alternatives exist. They need to explain why those aren't very good. They try to say they don't have like computers at home and they have computers at school. Okay, so just use Google at home, right? They then try to. But another thing, I would like to try and flip some of their claims, and that's to say that this AI technology is likely to be paywalled. This is because there's a big demand for it, so that means there's likely to be huge profits for it. So in the future, companies are likely to buy out like these free AI right now, like ChatGPT, and do things like patent it in the future. So that means they'd like to buy a huge paywall. So that means these poor schools now have to spend a lot of their incredibly limited resources on buying these expensive paywalls for these AI for like each student, so they can like use it at home. So that means, and that's like a big opportunity cost, right? You spend that instead on like textbooks, teachers, resources, instead of devices, so they could like take those home and actually use that for Google. You actively take away those opportunities from them. You actively take away these important resources. But now then, with that out of the way, as to why you get worse education, I'm going to explain to you why even if you get like a pretty decent curriculum, I'm going to explain to you why there's a huge waste of resources and there's a huge opportunity cost there. And the thing to say here is that you have to restructure the whole curriculum to do this. Because what's the point of online internals if everyone can just like do it for ChatGPT? Everyone can just like put it to ChatGPT now, right? So to restructure these whole curriculums, what does this result in? Firstly, the Ministry of Education has limited discourse. They have to spend a lot of that limited discourse by restructuring the whole education program, and that discourse can be better spent because NCA sucks. As a person who does NCA, it's really bad. I think the Ministry of Education spend all of their discourse improving that, but also there are things like disadvantages for those who are in like minorities, or for those who are in poor schools, and you have to also constantly evaluate whether like the schoolwork is too hard or too easy. There are a lot of things you need to do to like keep up schools, and you actively take away the discourse away from that. And note that these are these are much easier to implement. So rather than like restructuring the whole education system around AI, so you just have a huge opportunity cost there. We're spending it on like these worse things, right? But secondly, is that it wastes teachers' times because now they have to like relearn everything. Now that 80-year-old woman has has to like a seminar on like has to spend like so much time learning about like what the hell ChatGPT is, and this results in a couple things. Firstly, it results in worse teachers that are stressed and don't know the stuff because they have to like relearn everything they're taught, and also know that AI is something that constantly develops, so the curriculum constantly develops, which even wastes further resources, but also that the teachers have to spend even more time on it. But secondly, you're less likely to be a teacher in the first place, because if you're a teacher, you're probably not like that interested in like, not if your teacher is probably that interested in like the complexities of AI, right? And teaching is also a passion job, and you take away that passion. So then overall you're less likely to have teachers on their side, and they're more stressed out, they're more burnt out. Now then, before moving on to my split point on the perception of illegitimacy, I'll take a POI.
Does the speaker acknowledge that ChatGPT is like really useful at filling gaps in learning and actually probably won't up you?
No, I don't, because of all the material I gave you before. Now then, let's talk about it. You are likely to see it as illegitimate. Employers see it as illegitimate. Why not? Because note that this is about perception. You think they didn't go through those steps. Even if they went through those steps of learning, you don't think they did. You think they just took the shortcut. You don't think that they went through the hard work that you did. So a lot of people see it as illegitimate. You don't actually think they're qualified. And this results in two things. Firstly, it results in a huge amount of inefficiency. Those in the universities, those who are the job employers, they have to spend a lot of time deciding whether or not this person is actually qualified, which they could spend on the job, which they could spend just like doing like other more useful things, right? But secondly, is that this unfairly targets poor people and minorities, those people who already have stigmas around being less educated within the status quo, and they're the people who are most likely to be targeted and told, you're the one who's not qualified, your qualifications are not legitimate. And this is bad because these people suffer within the status quo. They already face systemic discrimination, they already face the stereotypes, they're uniquely vulnerable actors. On their side, they're holding them back even more with the sense of illegitimacy.
To the speaker, and we'll hear from the second speaker for the opposition.
In this debate, the affirming team have acted as if we are advocating for replacing all teachers with AI, refusing to engage with the fact that we think that it is an incredible tool to work in tandem with them. Two main questions for you in this debate. Firstly, what is the effect on disadvantaged students under the status quo? And then secondly, what's the effect on broader educational outcomes? But firstly, a split point on why students becoming more comfortable with AI is generally a good thing for the world. So firstly on that, right? We think that as AI writing tools become better and become more useful in society, right? More and more employers will start be looking for people with those skills so that they can integrate them in their workplaces and can use that tool in a very effective way because of the things they've talked about, because it is efficient and because it can do those things, right? So students who have been using this tool throughout their education, right, will give them the best experience and skills to use these tools to their best ability, and will be able to do that, and so they will be better off in a world where these tools are becoming more and more prevalent, right? This is particularly important in this debate for two reasons, because it firstly directly engages with their material about people becoming less good in future in their workplaces, because actually when you ban it and then suddenly everyone will be having to use it because of the benefits that it has, that you create people who won't be able to do to use that, and we think that's bad on their side of the house. So that's why that's important. Cool. So firstly, what is the effect on disadvantaged students? We pretty clearly tell you that under the status quo, many students are being left behind, right? We think that this looks like students who are in disadvantaged, who are in poor areas, who do not have the same access to education because they are do not have teachers. They have large class sizes, and they are overworked teachers who are unable to account for every single student's questions in that class, right? What this allows students to do because of this tool is it allows them within the school to go and further their knowledge on these things. We think they are likely to do this because these students are still in class, right? It's not like these students are going to all that the affirming team have tried to tell us is that these students will not be engaging in with their teachers because they'll have like ChatGPT instead, right? We actually don't think this is true because we think that when students are like going and like asking ChatGPT questions and having to think about how to engage with that tool, it does actually make them more likely to then go and engage with their teachers to ask questions and to like be a part of that. So we actually think that's like a benefit that we get on our side, right? We also think that generally, like for like specific students who have like specific needs, like who have like learning difficulties or like have things like dyslexia, ADHD, who need like specific things that like many teachers are not able to deal with because they're having to teach to a like a wider class. This allows them to be able to get the resources that they need from the school. This largely went rebutted from the affirming team, so like we're very like happy like that we get like benefits for those like very vulnerable people within the educational system who are currently being left behind. I think that's really important. Moving on to like generally like the effect on broader educational outcomes, right? We've heard a couple of things from the affirming team here. Firstly, that that there are like less diverse ideas on their side of the house. We don't think they've done enough comparative analysis here because like actually what happens on our side is we get teachers still being able to provide the same level of education to these students, and then on top of that students are able to like get the extra opinion of the chat GPT of like these things. We actually inherently think this is like more a greater diversity of ideas because when you do, because you can get like teachers individually that like are biased, like have bias because they're human, right? Or or like who are getting things like can make mistakes, and actually getting like this like diverse ideas from these things is actually like more than that. We don't understand how you get less diverse ideas when you add one more thing that students are allowed to engage with, right? Secondly, they kind of told us that ChatGPT is biased. Again, we think the comparative is actually worse because ChatGPT takes from a very wide range of sources where teachers can often have like their own preconceived biases. We think that actually is quite harmful, and we think that actually we give like students the opportunity to get that as well. And but then so like we think like those exist like on both sides of the house. But the only other thing they told us is like it doesn't like stop students from like having to like apply knowledge or like do their like recurring things. Again, we think like when like teachers are aware, like teachers are aware of like this like tool, they will still be able to like set like tests or like do things that will like make students like engage with that kind of like critical thinking. What it like uniquely allows is for like a lot of teaching, which is actually being able to give students information. It allows students to get that information, to ask questions, in like a very accessible way, where most like teachers are like being overburdened, do not have the time to answer every single question, and we think that it like specifically allows that people to do that. Yeah, I'll take that.
Okay, so alternatives exist. Look at ADHD medication that specifically cater towards these disabled people. Are these AI programs catered to them more than these alternatives?
Again, notably, on the outside of the house, students both have all the alternatives that are like presented to help students within the classroom, and then also get to use ChatGPT to help them as well. Like crucially, we think that we're just adding more tools for students to like get an education, and we think almost like an attention within your team is that you tell us that like ChatGPT won't help people, and yet we think that like if they're like going to think they're going to use it because it does, right? And like we think that like that is like very important. We also think that it is like better than Google. Like for a couple of I'll just quickly get away, it's better than Google because we think that it like allows to engage students specifically with the question they're looking for. In fact, for students that like sometimes are lazy, it allows them to actually engage with the material instead of having to go like search for it for a long time, right? We think that's actually like more likely to get students engaged with material. We think that's good. And things. We also like just like all the reasons we gave you at first on why we think like ChatGPT is actually a good thing in this like for those students. Okay, finally, like briefly to talk about like restructuring curriculums, which we heard at the end of second, right? Like they told us like how they'll have to like adjust like tests to like not be to like not like account for this. Firstly, we think that actually like in a world where ChatGPT does exist, like to some degree this pressure exists on both sides because both like there will still be like bad actors who will like be willing to use like ChatGPT to like things when like there's like when you've banned it, right? Again, like you're removing it from a lot of students who won't be engaging with that. But so there will still be like a pressure to restructure curriculums. But also we think that actually like this is like potentially like a good thing because like we'll be like reframing like a lot of like education around these tools that we think will be becoming more prevalent within society, right? This links back to the first point around like how like we get like people being more comfortable with ChatGPT, an education system that is more engaged with AI, which we think is like vitally important in a world where AI is becoming significantly more important. So what have we told you at the end of the debate? We told you that like most disadvantaged students do not have the same access to education, and we provide an extra tool for them to bridge this gap. Secondly, we tell you that generally it's a good tool like for broader education, and like teachers can use in tandem to like allow students afford a greater range of options. And thirdly, we tell you that actually it makes students like more comfortable with AI, which generally will make them better going forward. And for that reason, very proud to negate. Thank you.
Now I'm here, but thanks to you guys for that speech, and now we'll hear from